Thanks for tuning into another edition of Another Dolphins podcast. We had a chance to enjoy our Victory Monday, and we are back. We are gearing up for the effort that goes into a bye week. Josh, the Dolphins are coming off an epic 15-10 win over the New England Patriots. How was your Victory Monday, and how are you doing on this fine Tuesday afternoon?
I'm doing great, man. Like I said to you, just picked the kids up from school, had a meltdown already. I think my computer's lagging as well. So it's just a typical day over here at the Houtz's. But it was a victory Tuesday, and that's all that really matters. How's your week started, Jake? Any better than last week?
Dude, it's always better getting that win. And this show is pretty packed. There's been a lot of news happening in the AFC East. We have a bunch of injury news, and we're going to wrap the show with some of our listener comments that are being posted on 560 WQAM over on their YouTube channel. If you want to get involved, check us out on YouTube or AnotherDolphinsPodcast at gmail.com. We look forward to hearing from you. Josh, I'm going to be completely honest. All the people who said Dolphins should already be tanking, Dolphins shouldn't worry about winning, are so lame because I got to be honest, just having that W next to your name, I'm listening to podcasts, I'm checking my fantasy teams. I got a little pep in my step when the Dolphins win. And if you don't, shame on you.
Shame on me. And I mean, I'll be honest, the voices in my head had me doubting myself leading up to this game. But now that we did win this one, 2-3, you're sitting here second place. And like we said on the previous pod, there's so much football left to be played. So I'm glad that we're able to come on here and at least, have a little bit of hope, at least feel a little bit different than we would have if everything spiraled and we were 1-4 or even worse, 0-5 at this situation. So yeah, shame on you if you wanted to tank. We can talk about that later down the road. But for now, we're in the hunt, baby. Second place in the AFC East. And as we'll talk about, there's definitely some turmoil going on in the AFC East.
Josh, you hit the nail on the head. Speaking of spiraling, the Jets have fired Bob Saleh after starting the season 2-3. Robert Saleh was 20-36 as head coach of the New York Jets. And Josh, he is the first coach to be fired following a London game since you got this one.
Say it again. Oh, it was Joe Philbin, right? Was it Joe
100%.
Philbin?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, of course it was. And they should have probably maybe even considered Flores. Didn't he lose to Urban Meyer? Was that over in London or something like that? So
yes.
He probably could have been another one of those names on that list. But yeah, Joe Philbin, man. We left him over there and I don't even know what he's doing now. Is he with the Cowboys?
I think he might be with the Cowboys, like an offensive line coach, something like that. But Josh, it's so ironic. We're sitting here talking about maybe the Dolphins should have been tanking. Maybe we're in a scenario where they shouldn't be trying to win football games. We're focusing on the draft. But the Jets saw 2-3, and instead of just pushing through, it's a long football season. Owner Woody Johnson smashes the panic button by firing Robert Saleh. So, Josh, what was your original thoughts on that? Obviously, the Jets start the season 2-3. They lost to the Vikings in London. That was a very ugly game. But overall, I mean, you could be in a lot worse scenarios than 2-3 through 5 weeks.
Am I fighting hard here? Can you hear me? It says recording error on my side, so I'm a little worried.
Oh, got it. Yeah, I can hear you.
Are we good?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, yeah. As long as you can still hear me, I can cut this up. Okay. So we were just talking about the Jets, correct? And they're spiraling out of control. This thing's
like basically 2-3 is not like the worst case scenario, and they still fired him.
Oh yeah, okay. Yeah, I think that's what has a lot of people surprised, right? I mean, it's kind of funny that in his little memo, he even called himself Ambassador Woody Johnson. So definitely something that they haven't done. I think I had written down since mid-season. I think this is their first mid-season firing ever. I think one of their coaches eventually stepped down and bleed late in the season. But yeah, huge moves there. And I think Jeff All, defense coordinator, had some stints around the league at linebacker coach, but disarray for the New York Jets, who, they had Super Bowl aspirations last year, again this year. And for Woody Johnson, he felt like this was the right move, but I don't know if that's necessarily the case.
I don't want to get too high up on my big J soapbox talking about journalism here, but Josh, it's been so annoying, just the misinformation that's been thrown about this left and right. It started with the idea that Saleh was going to get fired because he was going to fire Nathaniel Hackett. There's also some idea that Woody Johnson, who was an ambassador overseas under President Trump, there was some impression that he was talking with all his British buddies and they were making fun of him. So that's why Woody Johnson decided to fire Robert Saleh. But I have a tweet here from, I believe it is Connor Hughes, who covers the team. He said, former Jets head coach Robert Saleh was never going to fire offensive coordinator Nathaniel Hackett. That was not going to happen. However, he was going to demote his game day responsibilities this week. Saleh made a decision to give play calling to Todd Downing because of the continued issues on offense. And Josh, that's one of the biggest things here. This Jets defense is playing pretty well. All of the biggest issues for this Jets team are on the offensive side of the football. That's where I think this is so confusing. And, you know, I'm preaching patience for the Dolphins and like hey, it's a long season, mostly because we don't have a long football season. There's only 17 games. While there's only 17 games, man, we're just barely over that quarter of the way there mark. I mean, that just seems so early to make such a drastic change when you consider this is somebody who's been coordinating, organizing, setting up things as your head coach all year. Like, if this was a move you're going to make, do it at the end of last season. You don't go through all of the install during the summer. You don't go through all these months of training and working together just to launch them to the moon in week 6. That just seems like a very desperate move. And it's one of those things. I mean, think about it, Josh. How often do you do an emergency podcast or a team makes an emergency desperation move and it actually works?
And that's what we have to remember, Jake, as Dolphin fans. A quarter of the season is over. It's a marathon, not a sprint. I mean, we all wanted heads to roll just a week ago. We have people that are already looking towards the draft, firing Chris Grier, who the next coach might be. Those times may still come, but it is a long season ahead. And the first thing I thought when they did make this move is, what could that mean for the Dolphins? Like, we see Vic Fangio, going to the Eagles late in the playoff or for the playoffs to be a consultant, an analyst. The first thing I thought was, dude, Robert Saleh, please sign me up, get him on board somehow and let him just leak all the secrets to the Miami Dolphins. But maybe this is going to be something that ignites the Jets. I just think that, like you mentioned, man, it is a very, very, rash decision. I think, it's ultimately going to misfire in their face, because Robert Saleh looked to me, from an outsider's perspective, to be a very good head coach, although similar to Flores, where he was not so good on the offensive side of the ball.
The Jets were 5th in points per game defensively, 2nd in pass yards per game, 1st in yards per play, 3rd in pass touchdown rate, and 2nd in sack rate. And they're paying an offensive coordinator. His name is Aaron Rodgers. And I watched that London game, and I do think there's two sides to the coin, where there's a lot of scenarios where I think we look at someone like Mike McDaniel and say, hey, what is going on with special teams? There are scenarios where the Vic Fangio special, right, where it's 3rd and 29, we might as well guard 29 yards downfield type of thing. We saw scenarios where we wanted Mike McDaniel to be in a situation where go do something, right? We remember seeing him on the sideline screaming, figure it out. We saw Saleh try to kind of build a bridge with Rodgers. And Josh, have you ever seen the movie Wet Hot American Summer?
If I did, it was a very long time ago. So I do not, fill me in.
Star-studded cast, Elizabeth Banks, Pittsfield native, but I always go, there's a scene where Paul Rudd is sitting there and he's just eating breakfast. It's a movie about a summer camp, and it's very dramatic. It's very goofy. It's like the perfect, let's not take stuff too seriously, like Saturday night movie type of thing. So Paul Rudd's sitting there eating breakfast, and when he's done, he just takes his tray at the lunch table and he just launches it up against the wall. Why? Because he's Paul Rudd. He just decided to do that. It's Aaron Rodgers just decided to gun a ball at a receiver who's 2 yards away from him. But then what happens is the camp counselor walks by, and she goes to Paul Rudd and goes, you going to clean that up? Or are you going to take care of all that? And Paul Rudd gives her this look of like, wait, seriously? You're going to make me do this? And he just does the most dramatic, like every step just, a sigh. Oh, I got to drag my shoulders. And he picks up one thing and he looks back at the camp counselor, sighs again, lowers his shoulders. Dude, that's like watching a $40 million quarterback in Aaron Rodgers every single snap. It must have been such a, I don't feel bad. It's so much fun making fun of the Jets. The Jets suck. If there's one divisional rival that I love seeing be a complete dumpster fire, it's the Jets. But man, I don't know how you can be a fan of that franchise, see Rodgers be so pouty after plays where it's obviously his mistakes, and then you have a scenario where it's like, we got to fire Robert Saleh when his defense is playing well. God, man, as a Jets fan, I'd be losing my mind, and just the inconsistent stability or inability to have stability that this franchise just has absolutely loved forever.
And that's what a lot of this is, right? We kind of joked last year that, Aaron Rodgers was like the coach or the GM making these moves. Now he's sitting here, you see him bumping shoulder. Or was he pushing Salah away early in the season, from a
Yep.
hug? I mean, this thing had to just be fizzling over.
Gross.
So it's the New York Aaron Rodgers. And I mean, again, it's nice to be able to sit back and just kind of laugh at him from the Dolphins perspective. But somehow this could end up igniting them, and then we could be in trouble. So would much rather see the Jets, no pun intended, heading straight towards the ground.
In this scenario, let's say Aaron Rodgers is Brian Flores and Robert Saleh is Tua, and Brian Flores won this round in this scenario. That's kind of what it feels like when you bring up the hug and like the one side trying to like make it work. And that defense is playing well, but at the end of the day, as a head coach, your main goal above all else is to get everyone marching in the same direction, and it's very clear. The Jets, they had time to make it work though, and that's the thing that I always think is a little funny. Flipping the coin over to the New England Patriots, Josh, real quick. So imagine if you're a fan of the New England Patriots. You have 6 Super Bowls. You know what it's like to be successful. You enter Sunday's game as the 31st ranked offense in the NFL. And then you go ahead and lose at home to the 32nd ranked offense in the NFL, being the Miami Dolphins. You're on your 4th string left tackle. Your starting center, David Andrews, the cornerstone of that offensive line. It was just announced that he's going to miss the rest of the season with, I think, a torn rotator cuff. After losing to the Dolphins, Drake Maye and the New England Patriots decided to say, this is enough Jake Brisket. We've seen enough Jacoby Brissett. It's Drake Maye time. What are your thoughts on a decision like that? Because that seems like another one where it might not be sending someone out of the building, but this is a really quick decision that you can't really come back from.
Yeah, and you said it best. You can't come back from it. I know New England Patriots fans, they're a little bit, kind of torn, right? A lot of them want to see what Drake Maye can do, but at the same time, like you said, that offensive line looks like complete disarray. And coming from a Dolphins fan, that says a lot. So my first initial thought was, thank God they didn't make this move last week, right? We saw this game sputtering out of control, and just having Drake Maye come in, a wild card, just like Charlie jumping out of the back.
Run.
Wild card bitches, yeah, they end up coming back and winning that game. So I'm glad it's coming in. It's happening this weekend. I like Drake Maye pre-draft, but at the same time, again, he's a New England Patriot, so I will be rooting against him. But for the New England Patriots and their fans, I think it's the right move. I just don't know if that's the right offensive line for him to be coming in and debuting behind.
I think there's a firm agreement here that I think he needs that experience his rookie year. But man, I try to limit those games. I try to wait till maybe early November. Just there are going to be games where you can take some hits, but it's just like, hey, can you do this for 13 games? And is that not going to mess with you or change with your internal clock or things like that? So that's the only concern. But I mean, there were talks at the New England Patriots. There was a mutiny in the locker room. And that's another thing to consider, man. For the disaster the Dolphins have been, I think Mike McDaniel, with his word jumble press conferences, I think he's done a pretty good job of everyone staying the course, despite being, I think, one of the worst teams in football through 5 weeks.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and I had to look it up there. They play the Houston Texans this week, so not a great debut matchup when the Texans are playing out of their minds. So we'll see how that works. Again, don't if you're a Patriots fan, temper your expectations. But if you're a Patriots fan, you're probably not listening to this, right, Jake?
There might be a few of my pals up here in Massachusetts joining us. You never know. Yeah, there's just like that. The Jets scenario with, they still got to figure out play calling duties. With the Drake Maye scenario, it's, oh God, we're going to face the Texans that are so great at pressuring quarterbacks. Dude, I think Caleb Williams was pressured on like 55% of the snaps he played against the Texans a couple weeks ago. So, I mean, very weird decision, but as Dolphin fans, we will take it. Now that the dust has settled from Sunday's win, Josh, I wanted to bring up some injuries. Javon Holland has a broken bone in his hand. I don't necessarily know if that's different from a broken hand compared to just a broken bone in the hand. Sounds like he's going to be wearing a club. He's going to miss some time. Not great.
No, not great. When I think Jordan Poyer is also banged up, you're going to rely on Marcus Maye. Patrick McMorris was a guy that, we kind of got hyped up throughout preseason. So, yeah, when you're looking at the safety, when you're looking and hoping that, even Javon Holland could play at a high level in this defense, which we haven't really seen throughout the first 5 weeks, losing Poyer, not good for the secondary. But it did sound like Mike McDaniel wasn't against him eventually coming back and putting a club on that hand, which we already see Javon Holland mauling and, knocking them balls out. So I cannot imagine him with a club on there. That could be a little bit overpowered, right?
I like that, Josh. I like the way you're thinking. I don't know. We can't really. McDaniel doesn't put a time frame on these things. Josh, I think we're at a spot. The Dolphins have a bye week. I wouldn't be surprised if he misses 2 weeks or if he misses 4 weeks. It kind of feels like one of those things. And the Dolphins are getting a little tight. You mentioned Patrick McMorris, who's actually he needs to be activated off injured reserve, I believe. He's not on the pup list. He's actually on injured reserve. So yeah, he's going to take one of those spots to activate. So you wonder if you're going to be in a scenario where you could let Javon Holland go on IR. But I'd say, man, if I was a betting man, I'd say 2 games he's back in action. And then Jordan Poyer, he didn't practice at all last week due to a shin injury. McDaniel was asked if he'll be back, and McDaniel, he said, I feel good about where Poyer was at today, speaking about Sunday, and I feel good about the time that we have until our next game. So just positive on where we're at, where Poyer is at. I'm sorry. Not going to worry about timelines because I definitely don't have a timeline for this week. Could still be a lingering issue. And Josh, you mentioned it, Marcus Maye, he played 60 snaps in place of Jordan Poyer, 8 tackles, only 2 missed tackles, and he was Miami's 4th highest graded defender according to PFF.
Yeah, and I mean that's what they signed him for, right? He was a veteran that they had, could come in and be depth, but also in this situation, right? You need him to step up. So I think I don't know why I said Patrick Morris. I did think about, these guys that are already here, Marcus Maye. You have written down Elijah Campbell as well. So someone's going to need to step up, right? Because again, you're without Jordan Poyer, and I mean, let's be honest, Jordan Poyer wasn't playing great when he was healthy. So even when he comes back, I mean, you're still going to need someone. If Javon Holland's out, I got to keep reminding myself this is the bye week, and we do have that extra week. So yeah, not looking good for the secondary at all.
Would you be anywhere surprised if Marcus Maye ends up having a better year than Jordan Poyer?
No, not at this point. I mean, I probably would have. It probably would have been a toss up at the time, but I mean, what I saw from Jordan Poyer, I'm kind of a little bit angry at him. Took out Jalen Phillips. His shin's messed up. He didn't really look that good before. So yeah, I won't be surprised.
I think that's where we're heading, man. I think that's one of those signings we're gonna look back on. It's like, man, like, we were so shocked. Hey, he signed so early, and there were some other safeties on the market. Justin Simmons was out there late, a couple other players. So I was a little confused in that scenario, and it hasn't been paying off for the Miami Dolphins. Let me see here. Cam Smith wasn't activated this week. Instead, it was Nick Needham being elevated from the practice squad. But Josh, I believe he only played 1 snap, so I think we'll have to keep our eye out. Maybe next week will be the return of Cam Smith. Odell Beckham did play. I think he was targeted twice. He didn't have a reception, played about 11 snaps. And then finally, Devon Achane is in concussion protocol, but Josh, you hit the nail on the head. He has some extra time to rest up, work through the protocol. So, I mean, maybe he misses a game, maybe he misses 2 games, but the Dolphins really have time on their side here. And when you think about the CVS receipt injury reports that we had early in the year, it seems like this team is slowly starting to get healthy again.
Yeah, and this is what you want at the bye week. I mean, I don't know if I'm happy that's coming in week 6, but at the same time, when you look at where we're at, Tua, everything involved, I mean, it's probably a blessing that it is. So intrigued to see what happens moving forward with Devon Achane. I know we want to talk about the run game, but I mean, we have said it time and time again, Jalen Wright's more of that physical presence, right? If Jeff Wilson's not getting those inside carries, I don't think you want Devon Achane taking on that brunt of the hits. But I'm saying that, and I think the hit that he took was on the sidelines, right? Busted at the outside and just got obliterated. So that doesn't even prevent that from happening.
It's so hard, man. It's so hard to deal with those things. But I think McDaniel also said that Achane was in high spirits. So I'm sure we'll get some more news on that as he progresses through the concussion protocol. Josh, what an awesome game for Miami's rushing attack. 41 rushing attempts for 193 yards against the Patriots. Jalen Wright led the way with 13 carries for 86 yards. He had a long of 17, and he forced 4 missed tackles. But Josh, I think Raheem Mostert deserves some flowers. Rushing for 80 yards, coming back into action. The dude's 32 years old at this point. I think we really severely undervalued what he means to this offense. Not only from this perfect balance of speed and power for this McDaniel offense, he's just got an underrated swagger to him. This is a dude who led the league in rushing touchdowns last year. He's not messing around.
Yeah, and it's crazy. Like you said, he led the league in touchdowns, and we're sitting here, feeling a little bit underrated. And I'm the first one that can admit that. I think I said, with Jalen Wright back there, Devon Achane, some of those other guys, I don't know that you necessarily needed Raheem Mostert to get this engine going, but egg on my face, we saw it this past week. Raheem Mostert kind of gets overlooked because of what Jalen Wright did, but both those guys, they had exceptional games, and I think this was the second time in Mike McDaniel's coaching career where he called over 41 rushing attempts. So good things happen when you do that. Got to also tip your hat to Alec Ingold because that dude is he was everywhere. You saw the way that he impacted the game late there. And I think the one cool thing out of Mike McDaniel's press conference that I liked was he said, the reason he called those 7 plays was because he would look down at his play sheet. He would think the play was stopped for a 1-yard gain or whatever. And there were these rugby scrims where you saw him, get 3 or 4 yards and he would look down and think it's 2nd and 9 or whatever. And it turns out it's, 2nd and 6. So they just continued to churn the clock, run the ball, and we saw how effective it was. So don't know if you're gonna be able to do that every week, but there was a statement game for the Miami Dolphins rushing attack, and that starts with Alec Ingold, Raheem Mostert, and Jalen Wright.
Was that the touchdown drive you were talking about?
Yeah, sorry. I think a 7-minute, 36-second drive, 15 total plays, 11 I think were rushing, and then there were 7 that were consecutive rushing attempts late in the drive that they ended up, capitalizing on Alec Ingold. So crazy stuff, man. What happens when they listen to us fans and he sticks to the run, right?
There's a little bit of truth to that, man. I do think I don't ever think it's been a lack of effort, but I really feel like through Alec Ingold, I think he's entering his 3rd year in Miami. Don't you feel like he hasn't really been utilized to the extent that you'd see a fullback in this Kyle Shanahan offense really step up? Because it seemed like he's had scenarios where I think he had his first career receiving touchdown last year. He's always been a great lead blocker, but the thing about the McDaniel, the run game coordinator, the run game mastermind was like, nobody, quote unquote, is using fullbacks anymore. And the Dolphins were supposed to be that team that had it figured out.
Yeah, I mean, almost sometimes it seems like Mike McDaniel's overthinking things, right? I mean, in this game, they basically lined up in all 21 personnel, I formation most time and just pounded the rock like good old fashioned style. We didn't see all these crazy. Well, I think there were still a ton of motions, but you know what I mean. I mean, sometimes you just got to go back to the prehistoric times and just running the football, lining up in I formation, just beating those guys in front of you. And whether it was, I saw Robert Jones had an insane game. I mean, the offensive line is starting to mesh. We just hope they can stay healthy, and good things will hopefully continue to come.
That's the thing about Raheem Mostert too. I think he's just someone that if you have him around, good things are going to happen. He also caught both targets that went his way for 18 yards, and I believe he was also hit on a key pass interference play that was on a 3rd down. Teron Armstead said on having Mostert back in the lineup, just everything that he brings, that intensity, that competitiveness, the passion that he plays the game with, he's not afraid to challenge guys either. And Josh, you kind of wonder if that's what the Miami Dolphins offense was truly missing early in the year, just somebody that was going to get into someone's face and say, hey, we got to step up, we got to do something here, because I feel like a challenge is how you turn an offense that scored 9 points and 2 missed field goals into a team that can have a 15-play drive with 7 straight runs. That comes by challenging people in the huddle. I don't know if that's always, the play calling that really gets that done.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because I'm glad you mentioned that, and as well as that pass interference, because that was on that last drive where I think it kept things going and moved the chains. So you saw the defense confused. Oh shit, they ran over there, and he ran a quick little in route and they just grabbed him. So I think we personally I underestimated Raheem Mostert and what he brings to this offense, but I won't do that ever again.
Josh, we're 2 big fantasy guys here. I have a super flex dynasty league, so there's 2 quarterbacks and it's also 2 flex spots. So these are deep teams. I have both Jalen Wright and Raheem Mostert. If you're talking fantasy, man, at this point, and let's assume Devon Achane has time to recover, get through the concussion protocol. Let's assume, and we do know what happens when we assume, but Devon Achane, Raheem Mostert, and Jalen Wright healthy. How are you approaching that in fantasy?
I think in most of my leagues, I have Achane, so I'm probably by default. I mean, PPR, I think you definitely lean towards Achane. I think he's going to continue to be that guy in the receiving game. But other than that, I do like, what Jalen Wright can do consistently between the tackles, and as well as what Raheem Mostert's going to bring to this. I mean, he's probably that RB1 de facto, right? If he was healthy at the beginning of the year. Well, no, it was Achane, wasn't it? Didn't Achane get the technical start? Either way, you know what I'm saying. He can be that bell cow, that veteran presence moving on. So fantasy, Mostert, Achane right, but I think I want to move right up. I don't know. I'm torn.
I think Achane's just the 1A, just because I think when he's active, you're guaranteed like 5 scripted targets, and
he's a unicorn.
Exactly, and I think that's one of the best things to come out of this game. Now, don't get me wrong; you're not going to have a lot of opportunities for Raheem Mostert and Jalen Wright to combine for 32 carries. But I think that's why I'm leaning Devon Achane. You're always starting, and I think until we're proven otherwise, I think you put Mostert ahead of Jalen Wright. there's just a homer in me. I think there's some comfort of having him on the field. I think he's one of those leaders like a Tron Armstead out there who can really have guys in check, especially with the backup quarterback. So I'd go Achane, Mostert, and if you want to get spicy and like a double flex, throw it in right. But I don't foresee him getting so many opportunities each and every week until he takes them away from Mostert.
Yeah, I'm sitting here saying it. I mean, I have Achane right. I've sprinkled all out, and regardless, whatever week you start them, will probably be the week that they take the back seat, right? That's normally how it works.
The last player we wanted to bring up, Josh, was Jonnu Smith, because going into the bye week, I think one of the biggest concerns we had was, man, like, what is this Miami Dolphins offense doing? How are they trying to build this team? We have Jonnu Smith, who's going to be getting very, very minor, but still paychecks from the Miami Dolphins for like 3 years after he's gone from the team. Why isn't he involved? Why is he disappearing? Well, he had a massive performance against the Patriots, 5 receptions on 9 targets for 62 yards. He did have 6 receptions for 53 yards against the Bills, and Durham Smythe reached 50 yards twice at the tail end of last season. But Josh, over 10 yards per reception. This felt like the first time that we had a different type of pass catcher compared to the speedsters at wide receivers or the dynamic scat backs out of the backfield. Hey, we got a tight end that we can actually get involved with the offense. And that's a pretty exciting development going into the bye week. That was something that if Miami was to lose, or if it was like the regular Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, maybe the Odell Beckham show, that would be one of our big bye week asks, would be like, let's get the tight ends involved. It's impressive they did it a week earlier than that.
Yeah, maybe Snoop Huntley's almost programmed to, target the tight ends from his time there. And with the Ravens, I still think there's another element still to Jonnu Smith, whether it be the motion, some of those touches he gets in the run game. So I liked what we saw. I liked him becoming more involved in the pass catcher, but I still think there's that next element where you can just almost, take the offense to another level. But it was nice to see Jonnu Smith finally make some plays.
Last tight end to go for over 60 yards in a game for the Miami Dolphins, Mike Gesicki, 69 yards and 2 touchdowns against the Minnesota Vikings on October 16th, 2022, which off the top of my head, I don't even think Tua played in that game. So it's kind of interesting. The 2 best performances by Miami Dolphins tight ends in the last 3 years have been with Tua out of the lineup.
Very interesting. So maybe we're right where we say, he always focuses on Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. So maybe that's something that changes.
First read merchant, classic Tua.
Someone's saying it.
Dude, they're screaming it. They're screaming it at their computer right now. 28 minutes. We've jumped through some news, Josh. We jumped through some notes. I want to spend the rest of this podcast going through some listener comments. If you would like to join in the action, 560 WQAM on YouTube. You can also email us directly at AnotherDolphinsPodcast@gmail.com. Josh, I believe both of our DMs are also open. With that being said, I have a list of YouTube comments here. I just want to start with Happy Evelyn, who, Josh, summarized it perfectly. The Dolphins are 2-3. Tua's on injured reserve. The offense is one of the worst in the league. Who cares anymore?
This is all of us, right? This should be this. We had Stronger Together. We had Go Fins Up, Go Fins. Just who cares anymore? I like that. Yeah, they need to have it so we can get the little Dolphins throwback logo behind it. That'd be perfect. So who cares anymore? I like that, Evelyn.
I think that there is a strong foundation, and that's reasonable. I think the Dolphins have been an ugly football game, and there's so much work this franchise needs to do in order to be competitive. But man, I'm not throwing it all away. Yeah, we spend way too much time in the off season. We put too much effort into this podcast, too much hope, pain, and suffering into this team, where I still care, not by choice, but I'm begging that we can have at least a few more good weeks. Like I said, going into a bye week with a win is a good feeling. And I think that even if this team finishes with another 10-7, and that's kind of looking like the best case scenario, that's 10 fun weeks, man. Don't forget those.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing to take away from this is try not to care anymore, right? Try to take a step back and realize that, many of us let these
hope
teams,
is killing us.
affect. Yes, hope is killing us, and do not let them affect your every week like we probably have in the past. So who cares anymore to an extent, I guess is probably better to say.
J Mac going into the bye week at 2-3 is better than 1-4. Can confirm. I honestly wasn't expecting much, but as I watched the game, I saw guys playing their hearts out and acting like they really wanted to win. That's what gives me hope the rest of the season. Uno is going to come back, and that's when the offense will really start clicking, and we go on a nice win streak. Fins up, y'all. J-Mac has a good point, and Josh, it's worth noting that from here on out, the Miami Dolphins have the third weakest schedule in the entire NFL. But I think there's like I'm going to be on the side of a homer. As long as Miami's flirting with 500, I'm in my comfort zone. I can figure out a way. But I think something we still got to discuss, Josh, is this offense was kind of butt with Tua as well. Like I think that's something that like we think Tua's going to come back and we're going to be feeling good. I think there's a good chance that Cardinals defense right away go there. I think they play in a dome, so it will be a good opportunity for Tua to hit the ground running. But yeah, this offense was butt.
Yeah, and I mean, we're starting to see that it almost seems like the preseason's coming over these first 4 or 5 weeks. So yeah, we should probably expect for when Tua comes back to see a little bit of that. But I woke up on the wrong side of the bed the one day and tweeted out, something that got me very. Everyone was upset. I think it was a passing chart from the Bills game. But you're right, man. Every big game of the last 10 games or so, I think Tua is 5-5, and it just feels like this offense could take it to another step. So you're right. They're 2-3. We're back. The team's fighting. They're hungry. We're gonna get to a ton of low back, but those first few games could be a little bit hard. But if Tua Tagovailoa, this Dolphins team, Mike McDaniel, everyone is what we thought they were beginning of the season. There's no reason why they can't turn this thing around, and I think that should be the expectation, right? You're getting Tua back. You're 2-3 now. If you didn't lose the locker room, figure out a way to get back on track and figure out a way to make the playoffs and do everything that you expected to. Sorry about that long rant.
No, dude, it's spot on. And I think that's kind of the key here. I think we both acknowledge there's so much work that this franchise has to do in order to get in the right way. But we can still kind of just say we got a dub, especially against a team like the Patriots. I think that that's something you should be able to still appreciate that, have some fun with. Kurt Thorpe, 76-59. I'm impressed with the high-powered offense by the genius. I think that's a tongue-in-cheek throw at Mike McDaniel right there. But Josh, it's important to keep in mind here. There was a doinked field goal. There was a fumbled field goal. This offense was moving the ball pretty well, where I think if everybody was moving in the right direction and playing up to snuff, this Dolphins defense could have reached, or offense could have reached like a whopping 21 points, something dangerous like that. And that's a joke too, but man, like it's about finding ways to win when you have a third string quarterback in there, right? You just got to find ways. It's not always going to be ugly, but I mean, you can't sit there and be super negative and say that Miami didn't figure some things out, especially when you look at getting the different running backs involved in different ways.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, and you mentioned it. Snoop Huntley's been here for what, a month, if that, and you have to find a way to win in this NFL. I had a stat written down that this was the first road win the Dolphins ever had against the Pats, where they allowed over 150 plus rushing yards.
Wow.
So things are not going to go the way you expect, but just finding ways to win, finding ways to have Snoop Huntley, for them to get downfield and capitalize, run the ball 7 times, take off 7 minutes 30 seconds. That's what we wanted. But yeah, that's absolutely him just saying it. Hopefully that high-powered offense comes back, because that's what we were so excited for heading into this year, and it has been. With Tua, without Tua, absolutely buns, Jake.
Didn't it seem like Snoop was like twice as comfortable in his second outing? Like it was impressive
Definitely.
that he felt a lot better. And so keep that in mind. Like he's just arrived. He wasn't even the Baltimore Ravens backup quarterback. He was on the practice squad, right? He was their third string, just sitting around just in case, break in case of emergency quarterback. And he didn't play well against the Patriots. I think that's important to keep in mind. 18 for 31, 194 yards and an interception isn't playing well, but it's playing well enough to win, especially when you think about the other features that the Miami Dolphins are working with. So through these weeks, I know you want to stomp out the bad teams like the Patriots, but until you actually get a quarterback back that's making such a high amount of your salary cap, you got to keep that stuff in mind. And I think you got to keep that little bit of perspective on both sides of the football.
Yeah, absolutely. Keep that perspective. And I got to be honest. I mean, I've seen more out of Snoop Huntley in the last 4 weeks than we probably have out of Skylar Thompson. I mean, we all had kind of at
Yes.
high expectations, or at least thought this offense would show something with him out there. So, testament to Snoop Huntley being able to, get this offense under his control, and to go out there. And like you mentioned, he did not look like the game was too big for him. Had a huge difference in how he played that first game versus last week. So, let's see what he can continue to build on. But yeah, this offense has to do a lot better.
And he's always going to just yeet a throw over a receiver's head. He's going to, have the occasional, like he's a third string quarterback. And I think the key here is that Miami has the talent to lift through those type of situations. Something I think we overlooked a little bit in our Victory Monday podcast, Josh, from Daniel LG6ZP. It's easy if you just toe tap, then that's all you need. But if the heel comes down, it has to be in bounds. Dude, that Jalen Polk catch, the fact the Patriots got 2 chances to march down the field, and the fact they got pretty damn close, a heel away, that has to make you a little queasy. And I do want on the record, that's a lame rule, a very lame rule, and that's a way the Dolphins would lose a game. And that's the only reason I'm like not up in arms, because we've been there. We saw Ben Roethlisberger fumble the football on, what was it, November 10th, 2010, something like that. We all saw that. So this is like a little bit of karma coming back to us.
Yeah, boo-hoo. You can cry into your 6 Super Bowl rings or what? They lost more AFC championship games than we've seen playoffs appearances in the last few years. So, yeah, poor you. But I agree with you, man. I thought that was a dumb rule. I thought he was at the time, I was like, oh, shit, what a crazy catch. But that's just a testament to this team, right? I mean, we're 2-3, but at the same time, we're a Javon Holland forced fumble and Jalen Polk, like, hair away from being 0-5.
Sean Startix 1743. The only thing the Dolphins did yesterday is take themselves out of the running for top QB pick in next year's draft. Watch them bleep this up. All they got to do is quote unquote lose out. However, these dumbasses will win 6 games and end up picking at number 14. Dude, if you win 6 games, you're picking like 6, right? So that's not that bad. And 2, Josh, we had a slogan where the entire idea for the whole season was to tank for Tua. We tanked for 2, and then everyone was mad about it. I think there are comments like this where in the moment it seems so wise, and it's like, let's just get it over with, rip the Band-Aid off. That Band-Aid isn't getting ripped off, dude. You're pulling at that Band-Aid, gnawing at it for another 2.5 months. Like, it's such a long season where if it was like another 4 weeks down the road and Miami was at the 1-7 where you could do the Brian Flores crossroads of, or we can march back or just, pack it in, then you could pack it in. But man, at 2-3, that's silly talk in a league where 40% of playoff teams are changing every year, and the Miami Dolphins are coming off of back-to-back playoff runs. That's silly to give up on them that early.
Yeah, and I mean, you said about tank for Tua. I mean, we weren't right that time. I mean, fans will be torn over which quarterback to take, whether Sanders, Cam Ward. I mean, I really am not ready to go through that all again. And I mean, I don't know that I really would truly want to tank or lose out unless it's, you can't for one. And, we would need an Arch Manning or something for me to just completely sit there and say, blow this entire thing up. But one player is not going to fix everything, I don't think. So, yeah, man, lots of football to be played. But I do know there are a lot of people that feel that same way. So I don't know. We're just sick fans. We're sick, and it's the Dolphins' fault.
Think about those first 3 games of the Brian Flores era. They were the worst games I ever had to sit through in my entire life. That 2019 season, God, we're going to get railroaded every single game. It's going to be terrible. Yeah, and then what happened? Miami players got better. Players got more comfortable. You saw some diamonds in the rough. Nick Needham, Zach Sealer, guys that are still impacting this team. Really, it's so hard because there's only 1 game a week. It's so hard not to get caught up on that, and then we just talk about the 1 game per week. It's a very long season. It is a very, very long season. I saved this one for last, Josh, mostly because it's a nice pullback down to earth. The penalties, the bad snaps, the blocked punt. Sorry, this is from Mick Rack 10. The penalties, the bad snaps, the blocked punt. The only reason I wanted them to win because of the parlay I had. That game was garbage. The coaching is awful, and most of the roster is minor league talent. The problem with the spin on a win like this is fans get hopium and convince themselves of something it's not. I don't believe we win any game against a team over 500. We beat all the garbage last year, and that got us to the playoffs. We destroyed those garbage teams last year. We are barely beating them this year. If we go through another year and no changes are made, we are going to get the same thing next year with less cap space because of the big money contracts Greer out on the books. And just look at teams like Washington that turn it around in 1 year. We don't beat Washington. There's something wrong with the Dolphins. Let's not bury it with illusions. I'm just going to say off the top, are we forgetting that Washington has one of the worst offenses in the entire, or defenses in the entire NFL? I know Jaden Daniels is absolutely taking the league by storm. He's taking the league by storm. Let's see what happens in 5 weeks when there's a scouting report. It's so early to kind of get swept away. Look at the Trevor Lawrence situation. What's going on there? You tank for the number 1 pick. How's that working for the Jags? There, and I brought this one for last, Josh, because the penalties are unacceptable. Julian Hill's up to 7 now. The bad snaps, Blake Ferguson skipping rocks, unacceptable. There is a lot of issues with this football game, and that's important. But I do not think that you can look at this and say we are that like there's been no changes made. There's been no sort of growth because you see that they're trying different things. And I think after back-to-back playoff experience or trips, got to give them some time to let it play out.
Yeah, you got to give it time. You got to see the way this thing is, and who's to say when they're healthy? I mean, he mentioned Washington. We're all stoked about Jane Daniels. He looks great, but who's to say a healthy Miami Dolphins team? I mean, the Dolphins when they're healthy, they're one of the better teams in football. So I get what he's saying. I know that it is. I mean, I'm the first one to admit I was coming into that game negative as heck. Was ready to talk about Chris Greer, all that stuff, but like you mentioned, the season is way too long. We miss it as soon as it comes and goes. No reason to be this negative, but I mean, he has a good point about the not beating teams that have a winning record, falling apart, sugarcoating a turd, whatever you want to call it. They just got to find a way to win this year. That's really where we're at. And that's what we have to buy, regroup, and let's go back out there and hopefully turn this thing around.
And there aren't going to be any, Josh, I can't wait to be doing this podcast with you in 2 years on October 9th, 2026 and say, God, I'm so happy we lost that game to the New England Patriots in week 4 2 years ago. That just saved this entire franchise's trajectory. That is the key here. I get it. I get that there's a lot of emotions going on. It's a week-to-week league. Bring them all here. We'll talk through them with you all. We love this community. We love being Miami Dolphin fans, even though this team makes us cry a lot. That is it. That is all the time we have today on Another Dolphins podcast. Thank you all so much for joining us. If you missed it, we had our instant reaction pod where we celebrated Victory Monday the right way just a couple days ago. So go check that out. Want to get involved with the action? Send us an email at AnotherDolphinsPodcast@gmail.com. And you can check out our beautiful faces at 560 WQAM. We will be back with the show later this week to wrap up the bye week. But until then, stay safe. And more importantly, fins up.
Fins up.
Fins up.